This episode is brought to you by Burn, the fitness company behind the Today Show approved Burn board. If I'm being honest, working out can be a real chore, especially as a new dad in desperate need of sleep and cardio. Burn is founded by NEPA native Jimmy T. Martin, and his Burn board offers a low-impact core and cardio experience unlike anything I've done before. They have hundreds of on-demand workouts that are great for beginners, seasoned athletes, and out-of-shape podcast hosts who love supporting small businesses. My wife and I use it pretty frequently throughout the week, and it's honestly a great way to burn a ton of calories without burning a ton of cash. Not to mention, it's a great tool for skiers, runners, wrestlers, and hockey players. Jimmy is offering all On the Stacks listeners 15% off when they use the code STACKS15. Visit theburn.com today to get 15% off your purchase with code STACKS15 at checkout. Again, that's theburn, THEBRRN.com to get 15% off your purchase with code STACKS15. It's time to get on board today with Burn. This episode is brought to you by Blue Door Financial. Blue Door Financial will help you save money and reduce taxes to live a fuller financial life. To learn more, visit Blue Door Financial online at BLUdoorfinancial.com. That's BLUdoorfinancial.com.
So we're not here to be perfect. We're here to connect with the community, connect with professionals like myself, connect with your neighbor, connect with your grandmother, connect with people who are out there who can be a support to you. And especially right now when we're recovering from COVID, that's really all that a lot of these quote unquote behaviors we might see from our neurodiverse population is like their need and desire to want to connect. They miss that.
Oh yeah, whoa. Look, they can never keep me down, I'm going. And if I ever fail, just know I'll go again. I never quit, cause I know that every loss may lead to another win. I'm going up.
Hi, I'm Bill Corcoran Jr. This is the On the Stacks podcast. Today, I'm chatting with Mary Vanesko, founder and owner of Well Nurtured Development. What's up, podcast episode 119 of the On the Stacks podcast here in the Blue Door studio. Mary Vanesko, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Bill, for having me. I'm really excited to be here today.
Yeah, this is great. So your brothers, Chris and Steve, have been on the show, as you know, twice already, each. So you got some big shoes to fill.
I don't know. I think they might have to follow in my footsteps after this. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So but you're the baby of the family, right?
I am the baby of the family. So yes, I have been following in their footsteps for quite some time.
Yeah. Well, like you said, they should start following in yours.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So you're doing some really cool things.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here. So you've been an occupational therapist for a long time.
Yes.
And you've worked for a few large companies.
Yes.
And now you're offering the same services and then more on your own, doing this on your own, the entrepreneurial thing, which is cool and fun and exciting. So before we kind of get into all that, I want to learn a little bit more about you. When you were in high school, did you always know that this was going to be your career and your pursuit, your passion? Like where did this all start for you?
Yeah. So I think as a young girl, I always knew that I like to help people. Being in the helping profession was probably something that was always in my heart. And I always wanted to work with children, So with that said, I think my lifelong goal as a young little Mary was to be a child psychologist. So after several years of school in my undergrad, I always tell people that occupational therapy kind of found me. I was doing a clinical internship in Philadelphia at a behavioral health center. And one of my mentors said to me, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I'm thinking, I just went to school. I'm going to be a psychologist, just graduating.
just figuring this out.
I just graduated with my bachelor's in psychology. And at the time, I didn't really realize, moving on to get your master's was really an important step if you got your psychology degree. And he said, I'm thinking that you're going to be an occupational therapist. And I'm like, I have no idea what that is. So anyway, along with the short, in my gut, I was like, I'm going to kind of take this guy's advice. I'm going to look into this a little bit more. This was a mentor who was actually the head of the behavioral health center. And Tom, God rest his soul, he was such a good man. He brought me in his office and he said, look, school starts in 2 weeks. He said, I'm the professor there at Temple University. And he said, and I want you to be in my class. I said, Tom, it's 2 weeks from now. I said, there's no way. I didn't take any of my tests. I didn't have any letters of recommendation. There was nothing.
And this is grad school.
This is grad school. So this is like unheard of.
Right.
You know? And Tom North, and he said to me, do me a favor, get me 2 letters of recommendation. I'm going to get you a seat in front of the president. And he said, go take your MStats. And he said, go take your test. He said, if you pass that, he's like, you're in my class in 2 weeks. So he was the anatomy professor. And on a whim, I did it. 2 weeks later, I'm sitting in his class and I'm like, where am I?
This is crazy.
This is crazy. So I got into an accelerated program. My master's program was 2 years straight. I worked myself through. Honestly, it was the best decision I ever made. You know, some people go to work and they drag their feet, they drop their head, and, you know, every day is like a new adventure for me. Of course, there's, you know, some ups and downs of work that everybody has, but obviously, right, work isn't work if you love it. So I definitely think this is for me, and it's always been for me. And I was not just at the right place at the right time. I think it was always meant to be. So that's my little side story about how I became an OT.
So why Temple?
Why Temple?
Besides going, you know, and enjoying all the Philadelphia sports that you love so much.
I love Philadelphia sports. You know, I think I really just wanted to get out of the area at that point. I went from a small town in Harding to a small town in Bloomsburg, and I had this chance to take a clinical at in Philadelphia at a behavioral health center, and I was there. I was living with 2 friends. You know, I thought, you know, I'm going to do this city life thing. Let's do this. So I applied to Temple only because really I met Tom North, the mentor. I didn't apply to any other graduate schools. And like I said,
Temple found you.
Temple found me. Philly found me. OT found me. Yeah. So
Very cool. On the Stacks will be back in a flash after a word from our sponsor.
Hi, welcome to Access Anzalone. I'm Jamie Anzalone. Today I wanted to talk about what you look for in a personal injury law firm when you've unfortunately been in an accident or been the victim of medical malpractice. And the firm that you pick has to have experience in not only handling these cases, but trying these cases in front of juries and getting verdicts on these cases. One of the ways you can really tell if a law firm is doing a lot of that is to see if the lawyers in the firm are board certified. Several lawyers in our firm, including myself, are board certified by the National Board of Trial Advocacy. And that's not something you can just apply for and get. You only can get it if you have enough experience in a courtroom, and then also pass a 6-hour exam to show your expertise in that field. So when you're choosing your lawyer, look for that credential. Board certification is key.
And now we're back on the Stacks. So you started at Temple. Take me through it. You know, what was the grad school experience like at Temple?
Yeah. So, you know, I lived in Center City with, again, 2 friends. I felt like I was always the friend living with the friend, you know, up until I finally graduated. Yeah. I was living, you know, I was sleeping on a couch at one point. You know, I really didn't know my ins and outs of the city, but I had a few crucial friends there that really, you know, I felt like safe with. But I did end up riding my bike to and from North Philly, like, you know, looking back, I think to myself, gosh, how many brain injuries could have you got on that bike? But, you know, rode my bike to and from, and it was a 9-to-5 type of situation. I really couldn't work. So I took out some loans, and, you know, I made some good friends in grad school at that time, which is kind of unheard of. There was only 15 people in my grad school class. So we were all really close and really tight knit. And, you know, I would do some side jobs here and there. I think I waitressed a little bit, you know, to make some money. But that was, I eat, slept, and breathed OT school until I finally got into my first job, which was, again, in Philly. So I ended up staying in Philly for upwards to 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a long time.
It was a long time.
Bet you didn't imagine that.
I did not imagine that. But I'll tell you what, I had some really great professional experience there. I worked at Thomas Jefferson University Hospital. That was my first job right out of school. And I lasted there for about 6 years. And at the same time, I also took a job at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, and I was working there per diem on the weekend. So for most of my 20s, I was really working. And don't get me wrong, I had a lot of fun as well, but really like kind of just, fine-tuning my trade and learning from hands-on experience. I think that's the best way that I learn. I know that's for sure for me and a lot of people, but what you get taught in school, you can never really compare to what you get taught bedside in the field. So a lot of my work was in trauma hospitals.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So what would you say, like in that first 10 years of your career and being down there in Philly, right? Like what would you say you learned the most or had like the greatest experience with? Or
Wow. Well, that's a great question. I would say the most I learned personally about me was resilience. Nobody prepares you for walking into a patient's room who's about your age and had a massive stroke, and you're rehabilitating them back to function. Nobody prepares you for a baby dying in front of you. Nobody prepares you for, helping a family to, make their loved ones, like last days of their life, comfortable. And, a lot of what I do as an OT is to really help these families, whether it's from an infant to the aging and dying, to, feel the best they can with the quality of life that they have, and to really provide them with an experience that's going to be client-centered, to make them, like, again, no matter what days of their life it is, to make them feel good and to make them feel like a human and not just a patient or not just, somebody with a diagnosis. So resilience. I really had to walk into work every day and check my own baggage at the door as well. And I think, practicing that, I remember a mentor said to me, before you walk into a room, I want you to pause. Just pause. Take a deep breath and pause. Never in my wildest dreams would I imagine that little method that she gave me, that little strategy, would be something that I would use throughout the course of my entire career, because pausing is so powerful. Just to say, okay, I am here, I am now, I am present, I am with this family. And so resilience is one, but then also being mindful, being intentful, having this idea of, looking through a trauma-informed lens. And I know you and I kind of spoke about trauma-informed care, and that being a buzzword, if you will, now in the therapy world, in the professional world, in the medical world. But I learned that at such a young age because I did get to experience, patients at their worst, really at their worst, at their most acutely critical. And as I became a therapist and started working at Jefferson, I soon transitioned from adult bedside care to neonatal care, which is kind of how I ended up where I am today.
some of that is like really deep.
Yeah.
Like, so how did you, as a young person, deal with seeing some of those experiences for the first time? Like you said, school doesn't really prepare you for what you are going to experience and go through in real life. And, some of those, not to get real graphic, but I mean, there were some probably scary things that you experienced for the first time. Like how did you deal with that, just as a person?
Yeah, absolutely. Not well. I don't think I dealt with it very well. I'm being completely transparent. I was 25 years old. I remember, celebrating my 25th birthday when I took my first job, like maybe a month later. And so, such a still impressionable age, and being that most of my life was in school, I didn't really take time for personal development. It was all professional development. And if I could go back, I would say that's something I would have liked to start early on, or that's something that I try to pass down to those that I mentor now, to really kind of work on their own personal development in tandem with professional. Because although I feel like, I don't just do occupational therapy, I am an occupational therapist, I am so many other things. And had I branched off and really focused on me as a whole, which is what I would do with my patients, right? Focus on them as a whole, I could have had some better outlets. And, working out was always an outlet for me. Don't get me wrong. I wasn't crashing and burning every day after work or anything like that. But there was some heaviness, a lot of heaviness that I carried with me from day to day. And, I could remember being very emotional some nights and relying on friends to talk through some things, and relying on coworkers, and there were lots of happy hours after work, and just a lot of sharing, sad stories over, a drink. And that was the reality of working at a very young age in a high intense environment. But yeah, I would say running, I adopted running, yoga became a part of my repertoire of things that I did. Trying to go out in nature as much as I could in the city, which was very challenging. But after a while, the city wore on me. It did, because there wasn't as much of me in there that I saw anymore, other than work, if that makes sense.
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's really cool that you saw that and realized that.
Yeah, there was a word I remember using when I was deciding to leave Philly and become a travel therapist. I felt suffocated. I felt like I couldn't breathe, like I couldn't catch my breath. And I don't think it was from a professional standpoint. It was more, what makes Mary happy? What can I do to help foster wholeness, right? Rather than just Mary, who is a good occupational therapist. So yeah, I made a decision at right before I turned 30, and I up and moved to California. I took my first job as a travel therapist at Stanford University, and I thought, I'll just do one assignment. And I don't know if you know much about traveling, but you can do 3-month contracts and then just go back to, your daily work that you did if that company would take you back. And I thought, okay, yeah, definitely 3 months. I'm good. I'll go to California. I'll, get my feet wet in the ocean and play in the sand and do all the things so I could breathe again. I'll just head back to Philly or, find my way back to home. And I ended up traveling for 7 years. So I never stopped. Yeah.
So, but why California? Like, was it just like, hey, I'm just going to go to the other side of the country and just kind of like experience some new things?
Yeah. So, I think I'm an adventurer by nature. I don't really, again, you heard my story going into occupational therapy. If it felt right in my belly, in my gut, I was doing it, and just like that moment, I felt like a friend was out there and she was like, it's great. She was doing a travel assignment, come on out again, me couch surfing again, come on out, hang out on my couch,
Yep.
We're going to have a good time. And so, yeah, I found my way out to California, and it was mainly because of my friend Jolene, who was out there, and she was a physical therapist and fell in love. And how could you pass up Stanford University working there? So, it was kind of a dream come true. Some of the opportunities I have had, I'm so grateful for. I don't think that there was anything super special that I did to get some of these bigger contracts and working at these more prestigious hospitals other than my experience at Jefferson, right? Jefferson really set me up for success and CHOP. But just like utterly and just deep in my heart, so grateful for those experiences because they've just catapulted my career for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you were talking about pausing before, and it reminded me, it reminded me of this.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So, for those that are watching, they can see this, and I'll let you take it and explain what it is. But
okay,
go ahead.
So I don't really know the technical term for this. I should.
Stretchy ball. That's it.
It's not stretchy. Well, it is. It's an expansive ball.
Yeah.
It's an expanding tool that I use with children to help attune to them once they come into the clinic and to provide them with just an experience of what it feels like to be calm. So when I have a child come to me, I usually like to develop some type of routine with them for self-regulating activities or self-regulating strategies. And this is the one thing that I use. So we can do it together if you like.
Yeah, let's do it.
So just, I want you to just take a close look at this ball. You can use it as your point of focus.
Everybody watching is doing this too.
Everybody watching.
They better.
That's great. If you feel like you don't need the ball, you can close your eyes as I just guide you through these next few breaths. So just together, we're going to take a deep breath in, and we're going to fill up our belly with air. I want you to feel that breath go right deep down into your belly button and watch your belly get as big as this ball. And then we're going to exhale and let all that breath out as we make this ball get smaller and smaller and smaller. So just one breath like that can make, a child's day go from, feeling a little bit erratic in their nervous systems or dysregulated, we use that word a lot, to feeling regulated and feeling calm. So it really comes down to the autonomic nervous system and our approach to self-regulating activities. But yeah, this is one of my fun tools that I brought today.
Awesome. Well, I hope everybody now that did the activity, everybody feels good and warmed up to the show now.
Warmed up to the show.
Yeah. And one other thing I forgot, we were supposed to open the show with you playing and I forget the name.
So this is called, and yes, I did keep the tag on. I know you were kind of making fun of me earlier, but now we can take a look.
Yep,
audience.
there it is.
Free notes. This is also a self-regulating tool that I use with kids, adults of all ages, just to help with more of I call it a somatosensory meditation. So it's connecting mind and body. And really what that is kind of listening to your body and how it feels while you're meditating. So I will play a few free notes on here, but a really cool way to do it is just by, closing your eyes, and then I'm going to play this little tune. And when you can no longer hear the sound, I want you to fold your hands together.
Me right now?
Yeah, you right now.
All right, so I'm closing my eyes.
You're closing your eyes.
Okay.
And you're going to hear a pretty little sound. Okay, so open your hands because you're going to close your hands when you no longer hear the tune.
I'm bad at following directions.
You got this. Ready? Good job.
How did I do?
You did great.
Did I? Thank you.
So, the idea is just to use your senses to get you back into your body and back into your feels and back into that connection with your brain and your body.
I'm in it right now.
You're in it.
I'm back in it.
Yeah. Thanks for letting me share that with you.
Yeah, we were supposed to open the show with that, and I apologize to everybody. You've been wondering what that is, and I was going to replace that with the whole intro. Big fail. But
yeah, so this is a favorite for the kids, for the adults, for my Reiki clients, for my yoga clients. That's
cool.
Used a lot.
All right, so let's go back out to California.
Oh boy. Okay.
So take me to California. How long did you stay there, and what did you do out there at Stanford?
Okay, so I'm gonna actually backtrack a little bit.
Let's do it.
So when I was in Philadelphia, I had this great opportunity to dive into neonatal care. They don't teach you about neonatal care in school. I think I had like a one course wonder on NICU. And if anybody doesn't know who's listening what the NICU is, it's the Neonatal Intensive Care Unit, and it's where infants transition to if they've had, without lack of a better way of explaining it, a rough start. Could have been a traumatic birth, could have been that the mom was sick, could have been that the infant had an already known diagnosis and it needed some extra support. So that could have been respiratory support, medical support. So about 3 years into my career, I had a great opportunity to transition into the NICU and work there full time. And I did say that I didn't feel suffocated because of work. But what I did feel from work is that I needed a break from the neonatal care unit. And if there's OTs listening, they're probably like, are you crazy? Like, that's the best job. And for those of you who are in the NICU, they do understand the severity of that and how that can take a toll on you emotionally. I remember, leaving this job after several years and thinking, I just need a break from the neonatal intensive care unit. All I do there is work with families with trauma, moms who use drugs and alcohol, and babies who are going through withdrawal. So like 50% of my caseload in Center City, Philadelphia was what's called neonatal abstinence syndrome. also known as Now's syndrome. But neonatal abstinence syndrome is basically infants who are going through withdrawal. And it was a lot.
That's some heavy stuff.
And it's heavy stuff. And you're working with the families and the infants. And although what a great responsibility to have, to be able to provide these families with that care. But also on the other hand, right, if you remember what I said at the beginning, if you don't have all of the tools for yourself yet as a therapist to make yourself feel good, over time, you're just on a hamster wheel and you're trauma every day. And I did feel like that sometimes, so when I took this job out in California, it was a job for acute care, working with adults. So not something that was foreign to me. I certainly worked at Jefferson with the adult population. It was acute care working on the neuro population. So I worked with adults who've suffered from CVAs, who've had brain injuries, who've had brain tumors, the whole 9 yards of the neuro population. And some might say, oh gosh, well that's pretty traumatic too. And it's like, yes, it is, but it's just different. It was just different. And the difference between Philly and California was that I took the time out of work to explore, to go to the beach, to hike, to go to wineries, to, travel, go to San Francisco, explore the new city, drive down the coast with my friends, go camping. I learned very quickly how to paddleboard. I love paddleboarding. It's one of my favorite things to do. Kayaking, also one of my favorite things to do. So all these fun things that I never knew that I loved, right? That are
and
still
you couldn't really do in Philly,
right? And they're still part of me. And I really, I value that part of my life now so much more.
So you learned that in your early 30s.
Yeah, I mean, I always loved the beach. That's something that is part of who I am. I always loved visiting the beach when I was a young kid, going to the Jersey Shore with my family.
With all the Vaneskos? Packing everybody in the station wagon?
Packing everybody in the station wagon. How did you know we had a station wagon?
I know everything about the Vaneskos. Boy.
Yes, the blue panel station wagon. Yep, looking out the back. My feet were always hanging out.
I feel like your brothers talked about it maybe in a previous episode. Maybe that's why.
Maybe. Well, we have fond memories of it, right?
Yeah.
So, yes, I love the beach. I love the ocean. I love the water. And just learning that about me in my early 30s was pretty rad.
Yeah, cool. Mm-hmm. So how much time did you spend out in California before? Did you travel around the country too?
Yeah,
before moving back to the East Coast?
So it's a little foggy on my timeline because I traveled so much.
Right. Yeah.
But I worked in about 5-6 states: California, Florida, DC, Virginia, PA, and then I did some international travel.
Holy smokes.
In between. So
wow.
So yeah, it was a lot of fun. I was back and forth to California at least 5 times. So my first gig was at Stanford, and then I came back. I think DC was kind of my home base. I had lots of friends there, and I worked in DC and I worked in Virginia. Then I would go back to California, or I go back to Florida. I was always chasing the sun. So,
and the good weather.
and the good weather, yeah. And then, I think there was a turning point in my travel career when I actually was going to stop traveling. I remember I was in Hawaii and I was visiting a friend out there who was on her travel assignment. This is the beauty of the travel world. Not only do you travel, but you travel where other friends are traveling. Yeah. So my friend Jenny, she's out there in Hawaii and she says, come out. I said, all right, I'm going to come for a month. I'm just doing it. Come for a month. And I said, this is going to be my last stop. I'm heading home. And I get a call from my recruiter and she says, Mary, there's a great job opportunity for you. I said, Debbie, I am done. I'm like, absolutely. I'm not taking any more jobs. No way, no how. I'm moving back home. I made my decision. So at this point, I'm like, I'm not going to, I guess I could say my age. I was 36 at the time. So I was getting close to being finished. And she said, we have a great opportunity for you at USC. And I was like, oh, another hospital I can't turn down,
Back to Cali.
And I'm like, oh, I don't know. So in tandem, what's happening behind the scenes is, Steve's wife, Yvette. She's our genealogist of the family. I don't know if you heard the story from them, but this is pretty cool. She was doing her research and trying to find my dad's family.
Oh, I do know part of this, I think, but
Okay,
go
so
on.
this is kind of cool because it intertwines with my travel story.
This is cool. All right.
So Yvette finds my dad's side of the family, and at the same time, I'm wheeling and dealing with my, my contractor, and I'm like, look, I'll make this work if this is something that, like, basically that like fits in well with where my dad's family is. Basically, that's what I was doing. So, so lo and behold, the whole family was right around the area that I was going to be taking this job. So my recruiter, she hooks me up with the hospital. At this point, I've worked in so many different places. I said to the physical medicine and rehab manager, like, this is what I want. They gave it to me, and it was my first time negotiating there. And then she said, look, Mare, we have this new neonatal intensive care unit that's about to open. I said, okay. And she said, would you be interested in helping out? And I said, helping out in what way? And she said, well, we didn't build it yet. And I said, oh, okay. She said, so we need a clinical expert subject matter. And I was like,
Yeah, for double the salary.
Yeah. I was like, okay. So actually, I call Steve. I was like, hey, brother Steve, what should I do about this? I like to give him a little credit on this end. And he was like, look, you got to negotiate, And I talked to Chris. And
I could just hear these guys saying this. I can hear Steve's voice right now.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's what big brothers are for, So they kind of walked me through this process, and I said, look, I will work for you in the hospital working with adults, and I'll consult as your clinical expert subject matter as a consultant. And so that was that. It was a pivotal point in my career where I became an expert subject matter and a consultant and helped build a level 2 NICU at USC.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
Wow.
In the meantime, my dad. Let's go back to Phil.
The
Let's
family.
go back to Phil. Phil's heart was fully complete after he was able to fly out and kind of come hang out with me and meet his family. He met his sister, his half sister, two half sisters, a half brother, and lots of cousins. So 300 plus cousins out in California, and
Holy smokes!
Didn't meet them all yet, but the ones that we met are still close to us. So it was a really cool personal and professional point in my life.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
so I
wild.
stayed there for about 9 months, and then they're still one of my clients. So I still kind of do some work for them.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So did you end up going to Hawaii?
Oh yeah. So I was in Hawaii traveling when I was on the phone with my recruiter.
Doing the negotiating.
Yeah. So I was on the beach doing the negotiating, which is usually where I was. Some might say you're crazy for leaving that life, you know, but of course there's ups and downs to the travel life.
Yeah. So then what finally was the decision for you to move back, like, to the East Coast here, Pennsylvania,
Oh,
APA?
gosh. Yeah.
Are we here now? Are we at this point?
We're not here now.
Oh, okay. I'm skipping ahead.
You would think. So that was my plan. I was going to move back home. It was a great opportunity. I started consulting. I started teaching. I started teaching CEU courses for a couple larger companies that I had the affordability to travel with them as well. So I thought, okay, I love to travel. I don't want to take that away from my career. But I just have one more place to go, and that was San Diego. So I couldn't stop, Bill. It was hard.
Yeah,
so
you were addicted to this.
I was.
Yeah.
I was addicted to the life of not just change, but the professional and personal growth was just, it was like on steroids, right? Because some people, and I like give them so much credit for staying at one job and really learning like the ins and outs and climbing that corporate ladder. Like that is great, but that is just not my personality, right? So to be able to do that in such a short amount of time really forced me to grow just, again, that holistic growth that I'm trying to help my patients with. So it really like kind of pulled everything full circle for me. And yeah, it was addictive for sure. I mean,
but in a good way.
But in a great way.
Yeah, in a totally good way.
In a great way.
Yeah.
So yeah, San Diego was my last spot, and then I moved back, which actually was a blessing in disguise because I moved back right before COVID. And
So this is pretty recent.
Pretty recent. Yeah. Had I not moved back before COVID and if I was still traveling, I don't think I would have felt, I wouldn't have felt good about being away from my family at that point. But
Yeah. Look,
yeah.
everything kind of happens for a reason.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So here I am.
Seems to be the theme of your life so far in many, many ways.
I could write a book.
Yeah. So, you talk about, all this advancement and personal growth and professional growth.
Yeah.
Like where do you get the work ethic and the drive from? Because you have a really good work ethic and drive and passion for what you do.
Thanks. Growing up with,
Besides your two brothers.
I mean,
Chris and
I was
Steve.
just going to say, growing up in a family of six, and I've explored this with my therapist because everybody's got a therapist, right? And, trying to understand myself a little bit more in the performance, perspective. Some people are high performers for a reason, right? Not just in their genes or the way that they grew up, but sometimes you have to take a step back and say, is being a high performer everything you need to be in life, right? Or can you say no to some things? So to go back to your question, I think that growing up, being in a family of six, of all boys, and me the only girl, I'm sure there was a level of wanting to feel seen, right? And not in a bad way. Not saying that my brothers dismissed me by any means, or my parents dismissed me by any means. I had a good life growing up. I feel really grateful for my family and, for my experiences as a young kid. But I think life's about going back and looking at, some of the things that kind of shaped you and how sometimes it could shape you in a way that you don't realize that you're creating a habit and a pattern. And I had to take a minute there and say, okay, it's great to have good work ethic. And it's great to be a high performer. But it's okay to take a nap. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's okay to take a step back. And so I find myself sometimes in these patterns of high performance and then needing to dial it back a bit.
Take a breather.
Take a breather. Yeah. So I think that's the psychological side of it. And the other side is I love what I do. I love creating. I love, Steve, I have so many ideas spinning in my head at all times that to actually initiate it and do it and watch it come to fruition is so exciting, So sometimes people will look at my website or, just even look at my curriculum vitae and they're like, whoa, this is a lot in a short amount of time. And I don't think I would have it any other way, because that's part of my personality too, right? The excitement of change, of creating, of consulting, of teaching, of, I think I would never call myself a master of my trade, but I definitely put in the time, right? With my bedside skill.
Expert. Yeah.
And so it doesn't stop for professionals. You don't just say, okay, I'm doing the bedside thing or, I'm doing the clinic thing. I think for me, it's always looking forward at how can I pass this down now? How could I feed new therapists information? How can I help families who, may be struggling in a new area? And also bringing it back to this area has been really, really valuable for me, but I would hope for the families here too.
Yeah, you had to show your brothers who's boss.
I won't say anything on that, but no, but yeah, they honestly, Chris, Steve, Jeff, Matt, Mike, they've all shaped me in some way, shape or form, no pun intended there, but they've all had a very big impact on my life. And, I think, siblings do that, right?
Yeah.
And
definitely.
Being a close family does that. I mean, we all have our thing, right? But we all have our quarrels and it is what it is, right? But at the end of the day, if you can look at the good in the relationships, and how they've made you better rather than how they've maybe made you a little bit more hardened, then that's all you can really ask for. So I think that's where I'm at,
Yeah. All right. So 2020,
Okay.
you moved back.
Yes.
What was the plan?
Well, 2019, I guess.
Yeah. Right before pandemic.
Oh my gosh. I was a mess. I was like, I still had my consulting clients, and you go from being on the top, right? Yeah, I was top of the food chain. I was consulting for really prestigious hospital. I was making really good money. I mean, like good money where I felt comfortable. And I knew moving home was going to be a challenge for me, but I didn't know on what level. No one could have prepped me for it, So being home and close to my family was wonderful, but I took a nosedive. Yeah, I took a nosedive in my, I would say, mental health for a little bit, and not in a way that I couldn't work or, I couldn't get up and help people, but I wasn't my best self. It was just a really tough transition. The life that I lived to being stationary and not knowing what was next. So I took a couple per diem jobs in the area, and luckily for me, I could always find work, and that satisfied me for a few minutes.
So how did you kind of get out of that rut?
Honestly, COVID. So COVID was this blessing in disguise for me, although very traumatic in a lot of ways. And, I feel for so many families who had it worse than us and who've experienced loss on such a large scale. We definitely, and me personally, I have experienced loss throughout COVID. Maybe not just from COVID itself, but other personal loss that I had. But I took the time to really figure out what I wanted in my life and what I didn't want. And I pivoted. I had to come back to me again, right? Because there was that me that I found, and that me that was no longer suffocating, that me that was breathing, and that me that was thriving, and this like whole person. And I needed that again. And I'm like, how am I going to do this? So my travel stopped. I stopped teaching. I stopped teaching my CEU classes that I was doing all over the country. All travel stopped. I was consulting virtually. Thank God I had that. But I knew the per diem life wasn't for me. I knew that even though it was satisfying my needs in the moment, it wasn't going to keep me happy. I just knew it. So, I let go of my per diem jobs, and I just started creating. I just started thinking how, what, when, I knew I was always going to create something bigger here. And the brick and mortar was pushed again. I feel like everything's like just positioned well in my lap to happen. And so I got my certification in Reiki. I became pediatric yoga certified. I already had my yoga certification, and I just was learning. I just kept learning, and I'm like, I always wanted a wellness clinic. I always wanted something that was a preventative model, something that was going to help with, not just the standard occupational therapy, treatment ideas that the world knows, as OT. But I really wanted to highlight what OT was from this holistic standpoint. And that was and is providing families with an integrative model where they can come to a place to get yoga, to do peri and postnatal education, to get Reiki, to collaborate with these amazing businesses that also, developed and foster these relationships with, like Lingua. So
shout out to Lingua.
Shout out to Lingua LLC. Chelsea Zimmerman, she's brilliant. She's a speech pathologist, and I wish she could be here with me, but she literally, again, fell into my lap during COVID, and seems to be the theme, like you said. And we connected. We had very like-minded ideas of what care looked like for infants up into the aging, and specifically infants. I think, I could speak for Chelsea on this. She was a NICU therapist as well. So she came from that lens, that perspective of trauma-informed care. And so I really value and respect her as a person. So we're now under the same building Lingua LLC and Well Nurtured Development. And that all came about because of another shout out, Lindsay Dragon. And that's why we have this dragon here. Lindsay Dragon is the founder of a non-for-profit called Parenting Autism United. She's another badass woman out there who I just also respect. She, found a place through a friend, and we also share a building with her. So it's just this really nice symbiotic trifecta, yes, of caregivers and team members and family members and
badass women.
Yeah, collaborating, right? And just trying to live out our own truth while helping others, right?
Yeah, so all your businesses kind of complement each other.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and let me go back. The dragon isn't because of Lindsay's last name. So I wanted to
a little clarification. Yeah,
even though
but it'd be cool though, right?
It would be cool.
It would be cool.
So Lindsay actually offers what's called Dragon Tales. It's this great program that she does monthly for kids of all abilities to come for free. And she uses these different stories to help create a good or a good family connection with the child and the parent, or just a safe place for kids to come and feel good and happy and safe amongst, like minds. So she's pretty cool.
Cool. So you use the word preventative care.
Yeah.
What exactly is that?
Yeah, preventative care. So it's looking through a lens that is going to anticipate a child's development. For example, working with a mom with an infant who she might come to me and say, hey, Mary, I'm working with a speech therapist on breastfeeding. And I say, you know what, there's developmentally your child's on par, right? Everything looks great, but why don't you come to me for a session for some infant massage so that we can work on just you and your child connecting and learning communication? Because one thing I learned as a NICU therapist is communication doesn't just happen, right, when you begin talking. There's something called pre-language, and that's nonverbal communication. And that happens right at birth. And so helping parents learn their infant's communication through a trusting, safe environment where they are spending this one-on-one attention interaction with each other, and the mom is providing them with this beautiful massage, and the infant in return is giving that mom satisfaction, and they're both just, outpouring of oxytocin, which is this love drug, right? And creating a connection. So if there's anything I could do in my career, it would be to foster connection right now. Like connection and communication. It's missing. It's missing in humanity, right? So if we could start that at an early age, even infancy, so that parents can understand and anticipate their child's needs. And don't get me wrong, like parents innately know how to do this, right? So they do. But there's a miss. There's always a miss, right? I think there was an article out there, and I can't remember who the author was, but they said like 30% of parents, or not 30, yeah, 30% of parents can anticipate their child's needs in a typical, neurotypical home, which I don't like to use that word neurotypical, but that was how the article stated it. And 70% cannot. And it's not saying that they can't all the time. It's just that when they say it takes a village, right? It takes a village.
Yeah.
So really understanding prevention from even perinatal, like before a mom has a child, to come in and, learn just some of these strategies and to better prepare herself and dad on, I think dads always get left out on.
We do.
I know. I try to bring the whole family on what to expect, right? And not just through a book, but through hands-on learning and teaching and just communicating with maybe a professional who has worked with infants for, years. So that's prevention, from that standpoint. But preventative care is really just, anticipating your child's development or your own needs, and not really coming to your physician or your primary caregiver or an occupational or physical therapist or speech therapist when there's a problem. To know that, OT can be very holistic in that you can learn a strategy. You can learn a strategy that's going to increase your quality of life. It could be diet modification. It could not saying we're dietitians, but it could be lifestyle. There's a program out in California that was becoming a little bit more well-known called Lifestyle Redesign. And it was all created by an OT. Just, look, we can all use some type of management, whether you're an infant or an adult, but really looking at how can we make ourselves feel better as humans so that we don't have to kind of rewind and then have to put the Band-Aid on or, have to backtrack, especially in terms of development. I think we see a lot of kids who maybe were, amiss in diagnosis. We see this a lot. Or kids who, maybe fell through the cracks in school with their learning disabilities and they're not now 10 years old and they're, somebody's now realizing, okay, this kid is struggling. What can we do for them? Right. But if we start early at that parent-infant level, that early childhood development and teaching parents how to communicate with their children and how to create a safe place for them filled with love, right? Not just like, of course, parents, like I said, they know innately how to love, but to really foster a child-driven relationship, not just a parent-driven relationship. So now I'm getting a little deep on you. So this is like the difference between attachment and bonding. Attachment is, mommy, come play with me. And mommy says, okay, what do you want to play? I want to play dinosaurs. Okay, cool. And giving 5 minutes, 10 minutes out of their day versus, honey, we're going here, get in the car,
Yeah.
but really just attuning to their needs in a different way. And I think back at just the trajectory of children being seen, quote unquote. It really didn't start happening for until maybe the last couple decades where we were really looking at children as equals, right? They're not just like little beings that are just full of reflexes like babies and, we tell them what to do, when to do it. Like they have a voice, right? And so in my practice, I really try to help families understand that, you don't want the children to walk all over you, right? But they do have a voice and it's okay for them to want to be seen with an emotion, to have a meltdown, to have a tantrum. This idea of, positive parenting. Some people think of it as, the kids running the show, but that's not it at all. Kids need authority too. Without the authority, they would have anxiety, and we see that too, like the whole other side of it. But, I think it's more learning your child's and anticipating your child's needs, and really just taking a minute to say, like, what's going on underneath the behavior, right? Because it's not a behavior, it's something other than a behavior, So I'm kind of going down a rabbit hole with all of that. But prevention, it's really connection, communication, education, to sum it up, and that could be from 0 to the aging and dying. So.
Yeah. And you used this word before we started, neurodiversity.
Yes.
Does this kind of tie in with what you were just saying about like misdiagnosis, things like that?
Yes, sometimes. I think that neurodiverse is a new word that we're using instead of neurotypical and neuroatypical, or an atypical child versus a typical child, trying to get away from that language. And neurodiverse is this idea that all of our brains process things differently. And I think that as a culture, a rehabilitative culture, just medical culture, what have you, those who are in behavioral health are using this terminology so that it's all inclusion. And I almost think that, we're all neurodiverse. We can't just look at kids and populations of people who have, a disability or a disadvantage, or maybe just are a little bit more spicy, as neurodiverse, versus like what you and I are. I mean, I feel like I'm neurodiverse, you know, I have different ways of learning and I have my own sensory needs, and there's a spectrum for a reason. And maybe you fall up here on the spectrum and I fall here, but we're all on it, you know, so neurodiverse, right? We all have different needs in terms of our cognition and our learning and our processing. So, yeah, we were talking about neurodiverse earlier, and I think that it's just having this knowing and this like understanding that all children, no matter what their uniqueness is, right? They all need to have anticipatory needs met. We, you know, from that perspective, whether it's a sensory need, whether it's, you know, maybe they didn't sleep well that night, whether it's a nutritional need, whether, you know, they're having some gut issues, whether, you know, we all have different needs. And some parents might say, well, I have no problems at all with my child, you know, none at all. And it's like, well, great, good for you, you know, that's wonderful. But the bottom line is parents in general typically run into something at some point, right, with their children, and to be a little bit more compassionate with themselves and say, my child isn't weird, you know, my child isn't different in a bad way. My child isn't, you know, just because that they're labeled as neurodiverse, it doesn't separate them from the rest of society. We all of us really should be considered neurodiverse.
We all fall in there somewhere.
Yeah, we all fall in there somewhere. I mean, I was a super weird kid, you know, like
I'm still a super weird kid.
You know, there's the quirky kid and the unique kid and the kid with a little bit of extra sugar and spice, and the kid who
Yeah.
you know, makes you run for their money a little bit. It makes parents run for their money a little bit. But, you know, that's just because they all have different needs. So, yeah, so that's what it means to be neurodiverse. So that's just a word that the community at large might be hearing a little bit more. But for parents who are listening and, you know, who might be thinking about their own children, just to be more compassionate with themselves, right? Because we're not here to get it right. Like, newsflash, like we're not here to be perfect. And one thing that I try to help people with is just managing their expectations as a parent, because we live in this like society that, or I was talking about my own personal performance pressures, a society that almost, you know, gives you a badge of honor or gold medal for being a high performer. And you know, moms and dads who are working are expected to work just as hard while having a child, whether they have a disability or not. You know, there's no breathing room. There is none. So we're not here to be perfect. We're here to connect with the community, connect with professionals like myself, connect with your neighbor, connect with your grandmother, you know, connect with people who are out there who can be a support to you. And especially right now when we're recovering from COVID, that's really all that a lot of these quote unquote behaviors we might see from our neurodiverse population is like their need and desire to want to connect. You know, they missed that, especially these little kids who maybe, you know, really have not been in the real world until now. You know,
Yeah,
they're
it's
really
weird to think about.
Really experiencing the world in a different way that they've never experienced before.
Yeah, even us.
Mm-hmm. I know.
As adults.
Yep, that's why I carry my bear around me. No, okay.
Just
my
in case.
safety blanket.
You need to hug him.
I need to hug
Yeah.
him. Yeah. So.
Well, thanks for the free consultation today. No, I'm
welcome.
serious.
I'm long-winded, and I go
I'm
through
dead
these-
serious. So, like, I learned so much.
Oh.
Like, I really did. I
glad.
learned so much, and I'm sure everybody, you know, listening and watching
Yeah.
learned a lot too. I mean, like, we talked right before we started. You said to me, like, you know, I want to talk about and explain what an occupational therapist is, because you said to me, do you know? And I'm like, well, other than like looking it up on Google and looking on your website before you came, like, honestly, to be honest, like, I really didn't know or didn't know much, like, to be completely honest, like, didn't know much at all. And now I do.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, occupational therapy is a very diverse profession. It gets a lot of attention for the rehabilitative model, working on self-care skills. Like if you look up OT, that's probably what you saw, right? Working on activities of daily living, working on school-age performance, which could look like handwriting, and it could look like, proper seating in school. It is, working with patients on activity engagement through client-centered care, right? That's probably like some of the words you saw.
Definitely.
But OT is so much bigger than that. Our domains in our lens is really expansive. And what's cool about OT is that, maybe that's some of the things that we learned as some of the staple interventions and staple avenues to care for somebody is to provide them with client-centered, occupation-based activities to help them rehabilitate, right? Okay, so there's that. But then there's also looking outside that box and saying, what really do OTs embody? We embody holistic care. So what is holistic care? It's providing preventative, therapeutic activities that are going to create connection, right? And so I always go back to that big word connection, because connection equals love, and love is happy, and all that. But really looking at OT as this expansive profession that continues to grow. And just from like talking, I hope that I shared how my profession grew, so that those who are OTs might be like, oh, hey, I could kind of think outside the box and not maybe travel all over the world, but maybe that's what they want to do.
Get a little crazy.
Yeah, but know that you can work in a skilled nursing facility or an inpatient rehab and find your way into a neonatal intensive care unit, and then eventually begin to teach. And something that I never thought I would teach. I didn't think it was a part of who I was on that like larger macro scale. I thought one-on-one teaching was my niche. That's where I was cool and comfortable at. And now I teach. And then, you look even further, and now I'm an entrepreneur. I have my own business. So the layperson looking in, and as the OT also looking in, just to know that we have so much to offer, and it's not just those specific activities of daily living and, strengthening and, musculoskeletal like lens where we're helping people physically, but we have a responsibility to help people with their mental health. Actually, OT started off with mental health, so that's something that a lot of people don't even realize. Responsibility to help with mental health, to help with learning disabilities, to help with the things that aren't seen, right? To help with anxiety, to help with depression, to help with lifestyle management, to help with behaviors, to help with attachment, maternal and infant health and wellness. I mean, the list could go on and on and on. And these are things that are vague, I think, to the person looking in. But at the heart of it, that's where our skills translate the most, at the heart of it. And so, yeah, I feel fortunate to be an OT. I think there's a lot of OTs out there who might still feel frustrated, but there's always a way to take our profession specifically and translate it into what you love. This one therapist, she's helping to redesign apartments for seniors, and, using her ergonomic lens to help make things ADA compliant. Another therapist who is doing everything online and becoming their own entrepreneur online, selling, graphics and materials to help other therapists who are business owners thrive. There's just so many different avenues, So I so appreciate you highlighting our profession and highlighting well-nurtured development and what we do, because everything's an awareness, right? You don't have to be perfect. My model of care doesn't have to be your just right fit either. Maybe you're not into the holistic side of things, and that's okay. But knowing that some of these things exist, I think, is really important for our community.
100% agree. Yeah. Cool. So how can our listeners connect with you online, and where's the brick and mortar?
Okay, so our new brick and mortar is at 311 Wyoming Ave, so it's just right off of 8th Street if you're coming down the mountain. So to say that's what us Harding people say, going downtown or down the mountain.
Yep.
So the cross street is 8th and Wyoming Ave. And you could connect with me at on my website at wellnurtured.com, and I also have a Facebook and Instagram, so you could find me on those as well. You can certainly reach me anytime via phone at 570-336-0309, just throwing that out there, and my email is mary@wellnurtured.com, so feel free to reach out. I have people who reach out via Facebook all the time, but I don't want people to feel like they can't give me a call, drop me a text, shoot me an email, whatever's comfortable for them.
Very cool. Well, this was great. I feel like we need to throw in like one more jab at Chris and Steve before we finish. Or, I mean,
I'll let you take the jab.
Well, I'll just say, like,
because guess what? I see them more.
Yeah. Well, maybe they'll drop their sponsorship if I beat them up too much. I don't know. Well, they're, I think you one up them here.
You think so?
I do.
I think it was the free notes.
I do. Hear that?
That's
Amazing.
for you guys.
Excellent. All right, I think we'll end on that note. Mary Vanesko on the Stacks podcast in the Blue Door Studio. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
If you want to see more On the Stacks content, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/onthestackspodcast or search the hashtag #OnTheStacks on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and leave a review. We'll catch you next time on The Stacks.